On this week's episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds, we're joined by the head of games at Kickstarter, Asher McClennahan. We discuss Kickstarter page immersion, Kickstarter traffic analysis, tracking conversions via advanced analytics, and more. Let's get into it. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the1.com. Pershglek has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral1.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code Crowdfunding Nerds 101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his marketing level?
It's over 9,000!
What, 9,000? I must be using Crowdfunding Nerds.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean. And guess what? Today we have an excellent guest. We have Asher McClennahan, the head of the games team at Kickstarter. Welcome to the show.
Hello. I am humbled to be in your presence today.
Well, don't worry about being humbled. You are a fellow nerd, right? I mean, you're your former creator and
Right.
all the shenanigans, and I'm stoked to chat with you. First, I would just love maybe, for people that don't understand who you are and where you came from, share a little bit about your background for everybody listening and what made you qualified to jump in as the head of games.
Ooh, what made me qualified? Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, hopefully I can answer that one satisfactorily. But so a lot of my background, if we go back past 5 years ago, was in technology. So specifically, I worked as a product manager for business to business platforms. Weirdly enough, was sort of a technology niche that I found myself in. So I did that for IT training. I did that for this really kind of cool company that was a crowdfunded company, actually, that did cameras and automatic editing for what we called adventure experiences. So like skydiving and zip lining and exotic car driving. That was like a really wild couple years. But I worked with a bunch of business owners and creative communities to sort of help them and sort of provide services to them. And then I was really burnt out doing that. I was sort of constantly on the road, and I had some friends who were working on a virtual tabletop, a way to play D&D or other RPGs online for any of you that are not nerds in that specific niche. And so we spun up Alchemy RPG. And so I ran the operations for that team. We're a small but mighty, and we worked in the industry. I did that for quite some time. I mean, until fairly recently, we ran 3 crowdfunding campaigns, and I tell everybody that I need to run a 4th because we've raised $954,000 across 3 campaigns.
Oh.
So I'm just like $46,000 short of a much quicker answer.
Yeah.
But we have made our fair share of mistakes, like choosing to do hand-pressed vinyl as an add-on for a tabletop role-playing game. As cool as that was, I mean, it's pretty sweet. Maybe not the most fiduciarily responsible decision, but ran a couple campaigns, really had an amazing time kind of learning about and working for the community of tabletop role-playing games. And then now I'm here. This job came up and I was really excited about it, but also pretty serious about like what Kickstarter's place in the world is. And so we interviewed, and I'm very fortunate to be here working with creators to try to uplift them and figure out how we as Kickstarter can best support people who just want to make cool games. It's like the best job in the world.
That's awesome. I got to have a conversation with you on a webinar previous, and I used the analogy of the head of games in the Hunger Games, and how it seemed like the head of games switched so many times, and that just like the Hunger Games, like your predecessor, I don't know if they ate poison berries or what happened exactly, but here you are, and but it's been great to see. It seems like things are stabilizing as far as like on your team. You've been around, you've been doing really great work. You've been a very what is wonderful for me to see as a creator myself, but also as a marketing guy that uses Kickstarter, it's like what we make our living off of. It's like 50% of everything that we do is crowdfund things on Kickstarter. And it's great to see not only stability but also community outreach. I think that there's been no other head of games that has been so determined to be involved with the community. You did like an article. Jamie Stegmeyer featured you on his blog, Stonemaier Games. That was pretty recent. We can link to that in the show notes, where you shared some good stuff there. And so I think kudos to you. That's definitely something that I find is a very positive thing that
Thanks.
is so important.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. My perspective is like and I said this in the article much more eloquently because I had time to write it and delete it. But I think the reality for me is that like the only reason that we were successful on Kickstarter, that the company was successful, and that I was able to learn the industry is because we got really lucky. The designer and founder of Alchemy, Chris, was just at PAX Unplugged and sort of happened upon the Hit Point Press booth. And Rico, who runs Hit Point Press, was excited to share everything that he could with us and introduced us to a ton of other people. And those people taught us how to think about crowdfunding and how to learn about the games industry. And if you are a new creator, it is really challenging to figure out and find those people. This industry is so generous with time and knowledge. It's not like other industries. Like in a lot of other industries, you try to get some insider info and everybody's kind of cagey and evasive and sort of not quite so ready to spill the beans and like give you all of the information that you need. But this industry is unique in that like everybody will sit down and talk to you no matter who you are, what you want to do. They will help you. They will democratize that information. And so I feel a very deep responsibility to be a shepherd of that information because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the kindness of other creators. So like, it's almost like a moral imperative for me that I do exactly the same thing. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show.
So, Asher, I know that you were a longtime listener to the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast. Yeah. How exactly did you come in contact with what we're doing here?
I'm a listener. Like that is my mode of learning. So I'm like a voracious audiobook person. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And so when we were running our second crowdfunding campaign, the Lore of Ethera, I was looking for somebody who could help me understand sort of the business end of things. And I came across y'all. You guys are so straightforward with your advice. Like everything is so actionable that I kind of got hooked. And then you ended up doing some cool interviews. And it's been really, really genuinely interesting. You guys focus on the marketing side of things. And I think you bang the right drums in a way that's really accessible for people. Like, I think when you talk to a lot of other agencies and people, there's really, we have a lot of conversations about ad spend and less about engaging community. So I think that like you guys being really transparent with your podcast is what turned me on to it and what kept me listening for, I think I've been listening for 2 or so years now. Really good stuff.
That's awesome. I always appreciate meeting my fans. So
yeah, I am definitely one. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you are familiar with phrases that we use all the time, probably one of them being hygiene factors. And
yeah.
So in your article that you shared on Stonemaier Games, you talked about certain mistakes that creators make when they go to Kickstarter. I'll just name them real quick. Number one, putting all your stretch goals out with pricing on the first day.
Yeah.
Number two, not understanding your numbers, like your costs and fulfillment estimates, and not putting in margin for stuff going wrong.
Yeah.
And then number three, all the time being spent on the design of the game, but then kind of using the Kickstarter page being an afterthought, the design of the page being an afterthought. I would love to know from you kind of what you see as the hygiene factors, the things you must absolutely have on your Kickstarter page, for the purpose, not just for like Kickstarter requirements, but I'm talking about from your perspective of head of games, giving advice to a new, creator going for the first time. What are the things that they really should have in the games category, we'll say? And if you want to, you can separate board game from tabletop RPG, because I think those things are different. Maybe board games have more things required, if you will, but you can just kind of go and love to hear your advice on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much I am a person who is really kind of hitching their giddy up these days. Forgive the ridiculous phrase. Hitching their giddy
You're from
up
Texas, right?
yeah, that's exactly right. To this idea that every creator's sort of idea for their game is probably good as long as it's a game that they want to play. We talked about this in the webinar that we did, Andrew. And so generally speaking, like, yes, there are certain things that you need to have, right? Like if it's a board game, everything that's on the back of the box like has to be in the Kickstarter page, right? Like you need to genuinely introduce people to this game and give them the information that they need in order to play the game. I was just talking to some folks that are running a tabletop role-playing game campaign right now, and one of the things that they did is they swapped their initial hero image that was sort of this like big, flashy, beautiful piece of art and a 50-word introduction from a lore perspective to the game. They weren't converting as high as they thought they would be on that. So they swapped it with the next graphic down, which was just like, here's the game. It's a, I think it's a D6 dice pool system, and it is rules light, and it is, apocalyptic sci-fi. It's this, it's that, the other. And that page ended up converting much, much higher because people were able to get the information really quickly. So I think that like being artful, having the art assets and the creatives that you need to immerse people in the product is very important. But more importantly, like the table stakes of helping people understand what the game is. When we look at video games, you have to have a playable demo of your game to be a really successful campaign. And so for board games and tabletop role-playing games, no, you don't have to have a playable demo, but you do have to enable people to immerse themselves in the game, right? Like this is your first opportunity to platform the game that you have. Every second of that page while somebody is scrolling should have some function of immersion into that game, whether or not it is the minutia of the mechanics and the detail of the game, or if it is really slick graphic design and sort of imagery and creatives around the page text as a wrapper to help people understand what it is they're getting themselves into. If it is an apocalyptic sci-fi tabletop role-playing game, for instance, you probably don't want to have graphic design that includes, a lot of flowers or neon pastel colors, right? Like we want to make sure that we are properly immersing people in the idea of the game, but then also providing them the sort of core details that they need. And like I mentioned, stretch goals, I feel like I made a mistake in that article because I said that because I see it every day. Somebody posts 20 stretch goals and it goes from like, their $15,000 first stretch goal after they funded to $1.5 million. Like, don't do that. And also, maybe don't have stretch goals if it doesn't make sense for you. Like I didn't say that in the article, and I wish that I had, because that's another thing. Like it's dependent on your audience, and not to monologue too much, but I think like that is the cornerstone of every Kickstarter page, is that the campaigns that do best deeply understand the people who they want to play the game, and they build their entire campaign for those people, not for
What if
everybody.
everyone wants to play my game?
That's not true. Right? There's like reality check. There
Yeah.
are people that just aren't interested in your game, and that's okay. Like, we need to understand who those people are that do actively want to champion your game. In technology, you talk a lot about the adoption curve, right? There's a slow hockey stick that goes towards mass market of a technology. Kickstarter is for early adopters. It's for people that want to see this project come to life. Who are those people? What is important to them? And how are you building your page for them is so core to what you should be doing on certainly your first and subsequent campaigns.
That's such good advice. Now, kind of to drill into that a little bit more, what we always say, like, we had Jeremy Howard on our podcast like 4.5 years ago. Great friend of the Crowdfunding Nerds, great friend of mine. He talked about the 3 scroll test. If what he does in essence is he scrolls 3 times, and if all of the essential information isn't where he wants it, for him to absorb within those 3 scrolls, you lose him, and he kind of goes on to the next thing. And since then, we've actually kind of decided, people need really a 1 scroll test. We have a 1 scroll test. You've got above the fold and then right below the fold. And it's like, I need to understand what your game is and why it's special and why I might be interested in it within a single scroll. And so, that single scroll, you mentioned a really great example of a TTRPG that led with like an art piece and thematic lore. And then they switched it to more like, the skeleton of this is the system, this is why it's interesting. Kind of the what is it called? The I call them unique selling position. The unique
USPs,
selling pieces, right? Those things are very important. So what I've always told people is I want to understand the hook of your game in 6 words or less. And that's really hard to do sometimes, right? And even for mine, like I finished my first Kickstarter and was still trying to understand what, for Deliverance, we call it, a game of angels, demons, and the saints caught between. And then we went to the demon slaying board game like Doom. And, but there are lots of games that kind of do that. You can think of others. And so eventually we settled on the Angelic Warfare board game. And that's what that's why you'd want to play it. That's what the hook is. That's kind of what to expect when you open the box and play it. And it takes time to get there. But then right after that, let's say you have the 1 hook. What is like the critical information I need in that 1 single scroll? So I scroll down and I see, okay, that's what your game is, but what else do I need? And it feels like, I guess, to kind of where I'm going with this is the mindset of the customer. I've always seen as somebody that needs an answer to the main question inside there, this like internal monologue going on inside their head. First of all, they wonder, what is this? And they're like, okay, now I understand what it is. Would I like it? And that's something that, if it's a tabletop RPG or if it's a, quick 15-minute filler game, or if it's this big, epic, expansive 900-hour RPG on a, in a box that you play and put away, whatever, like those things are things I need to know. And then what else do I really, really need to know as a customer? What are like, just even the smallest little mechanical things like player count? What do you think belongs in that first scroll?
I think playtesting explains all of that for you, because again, like, it's different for everybody. When we look at a campaign like Flamecraft Duels, really quick 2-player game that exists, the board game is the box is the board game. I don't know if you guys saw that. I thought that was brilliant. I hope more people do that. But what they need is very different than what the Shadow Dark RPG that just went live, just funded earlier this year needs, or what Tiny Epic Dungeons needs to explain. And so I hate to say this because it is really, it's true, but it also is less tangible. And I'm really big on giving people tangible advice. Get really good at stealing. There's like an old art phrase, imitators copy, artists steal. Take the things that you like from really great campaigns that are not dissimilar to what you're doing, and figure out, you sort of build a Venn diagram. What are the things that my playtesters are really caring about when I talk to them and when I explain this game to them? What's getting them excited? And what do they care about? Like, I usually recommend when you're playtesting, first of all, make sure you have a form and you're collecting emails while you're playtesting, right? Like, I was just talking to somebody who's like, I've been playtesting this for years. And I was like, oh, great. So you have a ton of emails, right? And he was like, 0. I was like, okay,
What?
well, let's go back to the drawing board there. But I prefer to ask people, okay, can you explain this game to me once they've played it? And I find those similarities in the things that they care about. And that's the kind of stuff that I build into the campaign. And so I take all of those things, I take these campaigns that I aspire to be, and then find that Venn diagram. What are the things that are really important? And again, I'm sorry that that's less than tangible,
Yeah.
but I think that it is so deeply dependent. There are games that don't really have to talk about the minutia of the game until way down the fold, because they are maybe so immersive from a lore perspective, or they have like a really effective, like it's really common in those legacy games, like a Gloomhaven style game, or tabletop role-playing games, especially third-party 5e stuff, to have what I call a kitchen sink graphic. Like, here's all the stuff that you get at this value-packed tier. And like, that really converts well for some of those campaigns, and it converts terribly for other games. So
Yep.
I'm really keen on what you are doing is unique, it's special, and it is individually you. Figure out what is working for other people, but then how other people are also thinking about your game. And that's the stuff that needs to be just below the fold.
Definitely. That's awesome. Love that. One thing I kind of like, I've always likened this to, I try to think about how humans operate, their brains. For me, when I sit down at a table with a new game, I've got a group of friends playing this new game. I need to know, in order to have context to even understand the rules or whatever, how I win.
Yeah.
I need to know how I win. I need to know if it's cooperative or competitive. Why is it competitive? Like if I'm playing Dead of Winter, it's cooperative, but there might be a traitor. It's like, snap. Like now I understand, right? It's like, if you told me it's cooperative for everyone, but potentially competitive for one person, it doesn't make sense. But if you tell me that someone might be a traitor, then it makes all the sense. And so context, I think, is really important. So for a game, I always think I need to know who I am. I need to know what am I doing and why it matters. So, why it matters is in essence interchangeable with how do I win, right? But in a TTRPG, it's not, I mean, I guess it's possible to win like a one shot, but it's like, how can I survive another day? How can, the winning is oftentimes the actual journey itself, right?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I think that that kind of logic really works well for people thinking about, I need to understand the context, like the important building blocks of everything else you're going to show me, everything that's in the box. For example, why does it matter that the box graph, like for example, my latest Council of Fallen campaign I ran last September, I had such long scrolling images of what's in the box. It was kind of ridiculous. I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to not only show what's in the expansion, but I need to show everything that's in the base game. I need to really make every single thing that's in there tantalizing and interesting on its own, so that when they scroll to what are darkness cards, they can actually read some of the cards and see the evil, bad things that happen and the bosses. And like, here's a boss card you can see 3/4 of. People are going to like zoom in and read it a little bit and say like, oh, I wonder, I'm going to try to like really sink their teeth into it. And the reason I did that was because that is the exact type of game that it is. I want people to sink their teeth into this and make it more of like in a lot of ways, like a lifestyle game where it's a campaign that you've played for a long time, you've been dedicated to it or whatever. And so I think that that's maybe the way to think about this is like, what can you give a player that will help them correctly understand the rest of your page? Like if I didn't tell people that my game was like a skirmish game where you play cooperatively as angels battling against demons, you win the game by beating the demons, then looking at like the what's in the box image doesn't make as much sense. It's like, why are the angels cool? Like, what, it's the number one thing that people want is more angels in the game.
Yeah.
But that's because they know why. That means the most replayability, the most variety. I could pick this fire angel or this water angel or this lightning angel, and it's a totally different experience. But you only understand that with context. And so if your game has nothing to do with, dungeon crawling and whatever, just help me understand what it does have to do with. I guess that's
Yeah, totally.
my sandbox.
It's not dissimilar. It's not dissimilar to like music. So I grew up. I spent my summers in a DJ booth. My dad was a radio DJ, and he would get. This is before radio was dead, but he would get a ton of demo tapes, and I was like, Dad, how do you listen to all of these? He'd have just stacks and stacks every single day, and he was in Houston, so it was a pretty major market. And he said every demo gets 4 seconds. So there's this sort of one initial gate that you have to get through where you have to be really interesting in the first 4 seconds. And that above the fold hero image, that is your 4 seconds. But what's different is that in radio, if my dad or whomever says, oh, this is good, I want to put it on the radio, then it's up to the sort of masses to listen and make sure that charts. It's the same person in a crowdfunding campaign that is your demo 4-second listener and your Billboard chart, right? So the rest of the song has to be really good for it to chart. So the rest of your campaign page is super important, but it has to match that sort of initial 4 seconds that they get in the demo. Like, I need this hook to be like, oh, what is that? This is changing my context in a way that I'm a little bit more leaned in now. It's still really important that you execute on what you hooked people with. And very often I see people indexing sort of one way or the other. Like, that hook will be less strong, but the game is incredible. Like, it'll be so interesting. And that's what I was saying about the Kickstarter page being kind of anemic, is like, wow, this is so cool. But you're not telling people. It's like you're starting with 4 seconds of just silence, of just like tape running noise. You know what I mean? So anytime you can really make sure the rest of that 2.5 minutes of that song are just so clutch and they match exactly what they get in those first 4 seconds, I think you're really well set up for a highly converting page. Because it goes the other way too, right? Super flashy image, and then the page doesn't convert the way that you want it to. And if that's happening to you, play around, change your graphics. Like, your Kickstarter page, your crowdfunding page is not static, right? Like, try to find the things that are working, what people are resonating with. I mean, that's a big part of being in product. When you look at a website, I'm using a heat map every single day, not at Kickstarter, but previously, to be like, okay, where are people pausing? Where are they scrolling? What else is continuing to catch people's eye? And try to narrow in on that during your campaign, especially during that mid-campaign slump, to see if you can get some more conversion on those eyes that are definitely hitting your page. Yeah.
I think another thing that we could probably suggest for pages, we have baked into our services for our clients Kickstarter page reviews, because it's just so important that they nail that before launching. And one thing that we constantly see is walls of text. I think this kind of goes into your idea of building immersion. There's nothing really too immersive of 3 paragraphs, well, essentially 3 paragraphs without any spaces, wall of text that people aren't going to frankly read. And then another issue with that as well, and even with text, is this idea of telling but not showing. You really have to show, not tell. You can't really say, oh, this is a 4-player game. It's better to actually show 4 people sitting around a table playing your game. And you've communicated the same thing, but you've done it visually, and it's just instantaneous that they're able to see the table presence and the 4 people playing the game or whatever. It's just a small example. I think that's key. And we've even seen this in e-commerce, particularly around tabletop role-playing games, selling them. A lot of the lifestyle shots do quite well. And it'd be as simple as someone just opening the book and flicking through the pages, because it's one thing to show all this cool art, but actually to show it in the book and someone flicking through the pages is far more immersive than just, seeing static images of like really nice art. But you kind of get that extra immersion when you actually see someone sitting at a table flicking through the book. Yeah,
a perfect example of facts tell, stories sell, right?
Yep.
You can put all the facts that you want in a page, but if it is just a wall of text, it's not going to sell anybody. It's the story. It's the narrative that you build in people's minds enabling them to see themselves flicking through, touching a mini, whatever the case may be, rolling a die. That is what sells people on the campaign page for sure.
Love
So
that.
actually,
Hey,
one thing that
speaking of, go ahead. Go ahead, Sean. I was going to say, speaking of facts.
yeah. Well, actually, one thing that we'd like to tap into is some of the data behind Kickstarter. I know part of our business is in SEO, so we do a lot of sort of monitoring of traffic and things. And I think this is looking at the traffic of Kickstarter and to some of your competitors is a real great way to kind of weigh up some of the benefits or disadvantages of different platforms. So I don't know if you were able to maybe dive in and tell us some information. One tool that we use is Ahrefs, and we've really been able to see that really, apart from Kickstarter, the next competitor in terms of just traffic month to month is really Indiegogo, which isn't really on the scene for the gaming genre. So could you maybe outline to some people the kind of weekly or monthly or daily traffic on average that Kickstarter sees?
I wanted to add in particular the organic traffic, because that's what everyone sees. It's like the buzzword on the in the crowdfunding scene. For what platform do you choose? Kickstarter has the organic traffic, and that's always like the 800-pound gorilla thing. Like the moment Kickstarter loses that, they become like Superman without his powers or something. And love to just learn a little bit about organic traffic. And obviously, Kickstarter is actually, to your credit, really up and coming with new features, which we'll get into later. But yeah, let's dive into that with an emphasis on organic.
Yeah, I mean, discoverability is so important to a campaign. And so, we have internal numbers, but I really try my best to be what's the word I want to use? I really try my best to be fair. And as a result, I'll use Ahrefs data itself instead of Kickstarter's internal data. That said, our internal data hits about all of the same ratios. Everybody's number is just a little bit higher. Ahrefs doesn't have all of the information, and so it's sort of a best guess approximation. I found it to be really close. But like if we look at last week, we had Kickstarter, according to Ahrefs, 26th May through 1st June, 1.6 million roughly uniques. So 1 week, a little over 1.5 million. We know from the creative download that we published last year that about 40% of our revenue was tabletop. So, do the math. It's 700,000 ish hits probably went towards games. I did not go to school for math, so forgive me if that number is not perfectly correct, but I think we're close enough. When we look at GameFound and BackerKit, the numbers are different, right? So 26 May through 1st June, BackerKit had 61,000 and GameFound had 73,000. So we have about a 10x in discoverability. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that if you're coming to the platform to make sure that people can see your game, BackerKit and GameFound have found themselves in niches where they sort of like serve or cater to a more specific type of game. And Kickstarter is a platform for absolutely everybody. And I think even when that is the case, our traffic and our backers, who very often back cross category, are really excited to come across new projects. And so, just from a pure eyes perspective, the numbers are a sort of minimum of like a 10x difference. And that's a pretty slow week for all of us all the way around. Usually, Kickstarter can over the course of a year, Kickstarter will go up to 2.5-3 million in a week, according to Ahrefs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at the data, and what we'll do is I'll take some screenshots on my Ahrefs and just share in the Crowdfunding Nerds community so that people can have some idea. So I guess look out for those screenshots in the Crowdfunding Nerds community. But the traffic, from what it looks like in the last year, Kickstarter has really started to spike, and like higher than it's ever been. If you've looked at it in like the last I don't know, like I'm looking at like the last 2 years, your traffic in April 2025 compared to April 2024 is just, it's 40% higher or something. I'd love to know what do you attribute that to?
Look, it's cool, man. I mean, I think there's this really cool thing happening in every industry, games, whatever the case may be. Kickstarter, we sort of very deeply understand that the thing that makes Kickstarter, the sort of secret sauce of it is communities that are excited to support people doing creative stuff, right? And that is not just games. And I think there has historically been a conversation about like, well, Kickstarter is not just games; they're not really paying, the attention that we deserve. And we are. I'm obviously here actively working to make sure that people don't feel that way. But I think one of the cool benefits of that, and something that we found, is like cross category backers are. It's a very popular thing to do because you sort of are brought in, right? When we look at like the Sanderson, the Cosmere RPG, that was a crazy crowdfunding campaign, very obviously. And what that did for every other tabletop role playing game, and just other categories entirely was awesome. Like it brought in so many fresh new eyes to the platform that really got excited about Kickstarter. And they were like, oh my God, this is so cool. So I can just like help people make their dreams come true. Like I actively want to get behind that. Um, and that's what we see all the time. So like really excited to see the Eufy. I don't know if you guys have seen that crowdfunding campaign. It might end up being one of the largest crowdfunding campaigns of all time, devoid of platform. It's like this crazy texture printing. I don't even really understand it. It's like a 3D printer that prints on textures. Really fascinating stuff. But the number of eyes that brings to Kickstarter is so good for the games community because there will be a non-trivial number of those people that are like, whoa, they got board games over here? I was here for a 3D printer, but I will absolutely back, X, Y, or Z. So I think that kind of is the secret sauce. And sort of we're leaning into that, right? Like our whole thing, the drum that I am very consistently banging to my team, to the product team, to our brand marketing team when we run events is how can we be of service? The only reason that Kickstarter exists and many of these games companies exist is because of Kickstarter. And we owe our success to creators. So how do we honor that? And how do every day, as a public benefit corporation who is, chartered to have a positive impact on the communities that we serve, how can we do that most effectively? So, like when we were at UK Games Expo, instead of having a booth, we decided that we were going to just kind of create space for creators to interact with one another. And like, yes, we celebrated the pledge manager and we talked about kind of all the new features and whatever, but we were talking about swag and we are like, what about t-shirts? What about pencils? What about this? What about that? And I said like, no, what's highly useful? And so we made little like power banks for creators that they could just grab, charge their phone, whatever. And so I think as a platform, that's something that we're really living and breathing right now is like, we can't do this without creators. We owe them. And we want to make sure that whatever we build really genuinely serves those people.
Asher, would you have any insights on how the Kickstarter algorithm works in relation to new backers? I know on every project you can go to the community tab, you're able to separate the recurring backers to new backers. Mm-hmm. If I was a programmer at Kickstarter, I'd certainly would have an emphasis on new backers because you're bringing in new people, fresh eyes into the ecosystem. Does that actually have a play in sort of the project's discoverability if there's a high percentage of new backers?
Yeah. Kickstarter is much like a lot of technology companies in that our algorithms are very important to us, right? Yeah. So there's not a ton that I can share specifically, but I will share that like we have hundreds of games campaigns on the platform at any given moment. I was actually just looking. Let's see. I bet I can find an answer very quickly about how many games campaigns we have live on the platform in this very moment. The number is I want just Kickstarter. How do I see that information daily? Almost there. Hold, please. Just in tabletop games alone, we have 536. So we have 536 tabletop games campaigns live right now on the platform and a success rate that is higher than ever before, which I'm very, very stoked about. We're at a success rate of like almost 80% on tabletop games this year. Like it's so cool. But at any rate, So we have 536 games on the platform. What that has enabled us to do over the past 16 years is build preference and enthusiasm and engagement, it all kind of wrapped up into this algorithm that exposes backers, new and previous, to campaigns that they're really going to love and really going to care about. So a lot of people I hear, like, I'm really concerned, if I go on BackerKit or if I go on GameFound, like, I know that I'll be on the front page because there's one page of campaigns or two or three. Doesn't mean to be a dig. There's just fewer campaigns on those platforms. So what is Kickstarter doing? And I think what's really cool about Kickstarter is, like, we have solved that problem, right? Like, we have been working through that for years now to make sure that when backers are really excited about a specific thing, they see that specific thing. If you're not a regular backer and you're just a creator or you're just sort of on the platform, you might not see that recommendation being super specific to you. But I think if you look at folks who do back a lot of projects, like, I'm getting really pointed recommendations that are really well tuned to what I genuinely back. And, like, otherwise, I don't know that games like Horse Majeure could exist, right? Horse Majeure is a 2-player RPG wherein you are two people in a horse costume trying to get an apple. That's the whole game. And it's successfully funded during Zine Quest, right? Like, if Kickstarter didn't have a pretty robust discovery and, like, recommendation algorithm, I'm not sure if that would get exposed to the right eyes, because that's a pretty specific game that I'm very stoked about. But it's obviously not for everybody. So
That is hilarious.
Yeah,
What else could I
know.
do in a horse costume, with one other player?
I'm saying, man. And it's like that kind of variety ends up being a strength of Kickstarter. Whereas I think some people feel like, I'm worried about this. We've gotten pretty good at making sure that the right people hit the right projects. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now to drill, I guess, deeper into the data. So we talked a little bit about the organic traffic. We talked a lot about the search functionality, which I really appreciate. One of the newer features you guys came out with is advanced analytics, and I'd like to get into that and conversion rate, like how to measure what percent conversion rate you're earning. If you have any advice on that. But then, we before we started our podcast, we got in just a little bit to, like, last click attribution versus, like, other methods of attribution, and we'll try to make this something that like the normal human can understand. But I would love to get your feedback on how do you personally measure if your advertising is working on Kickstarter. So if I spend $100 in Facebook ads for my live Kickstarter campaign, how can I know it's working? And then we'll dive into some problems or challenges that we to overcome.
Yeah. This is a really frustrating one for everybody on the planet. Just a heads up to anybody that's listening and is like, I don't really know how to do this. Nobody does. Nobody is very good at it. Really,
Amazon spends like billions of dollars, and nobody's good at it.
They're not totally sure about, like, how to attribute revenue to ad spend. So a couple of things there. Like, what I will say is there are a lot of services that will promise a ROAS. They can't do that. Like, that's not a reasonable thing to expect from somebody running ads. So just, like, word of caution there. When we look at attribution, a lot of folks who run a sort of performance marketing service, which is performance marketing, is like you run ads, and based on the performance of those ads, that is how you pay the service that the service provider, right?
Like, they get a commission, like a 15% cut of whatever they can prove you sold, or
that's right,
or a 20% cut of whatever they think they sold, which I don't know.
Yeah, and so
like a made up number.
Yeah. So I think that I think that the reality is, when you look at performance marketing attribution, there's single point attribution, which is link to pledge in this case, right? Like, you click the link, you pledge. And then there is multi-point attribution, which takes in a sort of variety of factors. And we have a performance marketing team, a performance team in our organization that has taught me some of this. Andrew, if you're listening, sorry if I get any of this wrong. But it uses multi-point attribution. And so our advanced analytics page on the platform that is available when the campaign is live shows you a sort of more holistic and multi-attribution view of how your campaign is doing, whereas the original dashboard is really just single point attribution. So if you see, a ref tag, you spent X dollars and you only got, one pledge in the basic dashboard, go look at the advanced analytics because it might have a more holistic view for you and it might show you a slightly different story. Sometimes they're dead on, and sometimes they are not. But I will say that, do your research. When you hire, there's the age old tale, right? A mechanic will just, you take a car into a mechanic for an oil change, and if they get the sense that you don't know what you're doing, there's a chance that you walk out with a new engine, and really all you needed was an oil change, right? Try to learn and just enough to be dangerous so that when you are conversing with anybody that provides this service, you can at least sound like you know what you're talking about, and they will make sure that they are as honest as they possibly can with you. Now, fortunately, I think there are multiple service providers out in the world that are pretty straightforward and they are honest, but you know, it is always sensible to know a little bit about what you're doing so that you can have a meaningful conversation with them about what your ROAS actually is mid-campaign. Because there are times that I have heard some folks say, well, they told me they got me a 7x ROAS, but when I really look into the numbers, the math is not mathing, as it were. So be hyper vigilant about that stuff. Nobody wants I don't want a creator to get hosed on ad spend because you guys don't deserve that.
One thing that we do for our clients is when running live campaigns, we track 3 metrics, and that is the funding, the total backers, and the total followers. So we kind of look at it holistically, where we might not be able to get a direct correlation between money in, money out, but if we can get an overall picture of increased ad spend with increased engagement or increased metrics in those 3 key areas, then we have a pretty good idea that what we're doing is working, and then we can scale accordingly. So I think that's something to keep in mind for people. The tracking can be challenging, but by keeping sort of a diligent tally of each day's functions, then you can work out pretty confidently that, okay, I've increased my ad spend by 50%. Have I seen a significant increase in the engagement of the campaign? And if not, then you need to change your targeting or you need to reduce your ad spend and so on and so forth. So that's something that we've done to work against that. And because we operate on a slightly different model, we don't use the performance marketing system. We're sort of flat feed. We can go to our clients and we can say, look, do you want to be aggressive and try to raise as much money as possible in your live campaign? Or do you want to be a little bit more cautious and try to get the kind of best cost per backer? And then we can extend that into the late pledge. I know that Kickstarter's, kind of pushed into the late pledge now. So that's now a strategy that you can employ very easily on Kickstarter, by which you can say, look, we were going to be a little bit careful with the ad spend because we were hoping to also pick up people in the late pledge. So we're not really just trying to, go full throttle on the live campaign. So you can kind of present this kind of different strategy towards your campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's really useful. And I will also say, if you are in a campaign and you're looking at all of that referral data, make sure that you are actually looking at every single ref tag. Like, I think it's really easy to just focus on your ad ref tags, but you're talking about a more holistic experience. And I think that's worth calling out. The Kickstarter platform, the basic dashboard will say, Kickstarter brings you anywhere from 30 to 60+% of the campaign, right? But then you look at those ref tags, and if you're really looking at them pragmatically, like a lot of them are search, right? Or like the automated emails that we send when a follower, when a project launches, right? Like we are taking credit for that, but that's not us. That's you guys, right? It's just not a custom ref tag. And so it's part of the Kickstarter pie. So like when somebody is searching for your game, there is a reason for that. And it's probably not because they went to Kickstarter.com and were just like, oh my God, deliverance. I need to search for that. I just feel it divinely that needs to happen. That is credit that should go to some other facet of what you're doing, ad spend, or community engagement on Reddit, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I always think about it in terms of drivers and capturers, things, or drivers and catchers.
Yeah.
The terminology is used for like ad initiatives. When I spend money as a creator on something, I get somebody's email list, they send me an email blast, or I run ads on Facebook or whatever. Or I get a reviewer to cover my game. That causes new people to learn about you that didn't know about you before, and it drives interest. They may not, for example, I think actually reviewer coverage in particular is great for this, where they might not back your game because of that, but they learn about your product because they like that creator. They listen to what that creator has to say. They learn a little bit about your product, and then an ad later will catch them, or they get an update, maybe some organic post on Facebook or whatever, and they end up back in the game. Well, what was the thing that drove that interest? The original interest was driven by that reviewer that covered your game. Even though if you give a reviewer a referral tag, you probably won't get very many people credited to that. But so I always try to separate out from the results things that like logically would make sense. So if this one ad source is the thing I'm spending money on that is teaching new people that I exist, or that's helping me to be discovered, or showing my product for the first time to a new group of people, and then my project, now that I'm spending this new ad money, suddenly increases at a greater rate with the key metrics that Sean just shared, follower count, funding goal, or funding count, and total funding and backer numbers, then the correlation is very strong. That this whatever is happening in these ads are causing this increase. And I remember back in 2020, I took on this one campaign called Planet Unknown, which actually has since done very well, but they came to me on like day 2 of their live campaign, and that's usually something we don't have time to take somebody on. But back then I didn't have, I want to say it was just me by myself at the time, and I'm like, yeah, I can jump on this right now. And we started, so he wasn't running any ads. His total funding was about $30,000. He had passed his first 2 days on Kickstarter, and even back then that was like at least 40, maybe percent of your funding is you're gonna earn that in the first 2 days, very commonly, and for board games. But he ended up, his campaign, we started at $40 a day in ads, and it was working, but we didn't have any tracking at all. Like I just didn't, it was, for whatever reason, it just wasn't tracking. The referral code showed 0 sales, but his campaign just started to elevate. This is the only marketing that he did. His campaign started to elevate. So we doubled the budget to 80. Then we doubled it again to 100, about 150. And he was at like 60,000 funded after, on his second week, or third, or between his first and second week. We managed to match the funding that he earned in his first 2 days. So we ended up in that campaign at like $700 a day. And in his last 2 days, he made $60,000, versus like the first 2 days making 30. It was wild. He ended up around 260,000 for that campaign. And it was my first indicator of, oh my goodness, ads work even if the metrics aren't like recording properly. So the recording is almost like in a way, all that matters is that at the end of the day, like it's working, but how it works is secondary. I think that the reason a marketer like myself and Sean, we get paid from clients is because we can tell people why that happens. And so the money that I'm spending, it's like, I hope this works. Like my other campaign, first deliverance campaign, very similar situation. I was like, I don't know, I hope this is working, but the funding keeps jumping, and on the second deliverance campaign that I, after so much more experience, like hundreds of campaigns under our belts and whatnot, it's like, okay, I now trust the process. I'm going to try to track and measure as best I can, but I'm going to spend a baseline of $100 a day or $200 a day, and just expect that the return is there. But if I could accurately measure, I mean, there are so many people listening to this podcast that would just say, yeah, I'd spend $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 a day if I could at least see that it was getting me 2.5 to 1 or whatever return. And so that's, I think, where it's tough, because you want to know exactly what's happening, but then there's this, if that ends up actually holding people back, where they're like, well, I'm not exactly sure of all the numbers, so during this 30 days of opportunity that I have my Kickstarter campaign live, I'm not going to press the gas.
Yeah.
And that's generally a huge mistake.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting. So I guess I have a question. I'm going to flip this one on its head. I have been thinking about how the sort of curve of pledges happens on every crowdfunding platform. It's all relatively similar. I don't have the internal data of the others, but everybody sort of knows. We've talked about like the rule of three. If you've been in the industry long enough, you know that like first 2 to 3 days, you're going to get X percentage, middle 26, you're going to get Y percentage. And then those last 2 to 3 days, you're going to get Z percentage. And they're generally, it used to be a rule of threes, like it was 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Now people are saying, it's a little bit closer to a backwards J, where there's a little smaller dip at the front. I'm wondering what your thoughts on that are. After hearing you talk about Planet Unknown, I have a hypothesis that we have gotten so good at pre-launch marketing, and we've been like, oh, this works, so we're just going to index all the way towards this and nobody has really figured out how effective to be super effective in the mid and end of the campaign to a lesser extent, obviously, because there's the FOMO element. Do you feel like, does that hypothesis ring true at all to you? Or do you think that there's something sort of inherently about crowdfunding that makes the sort of beginning the most exciting part by far?
So what I'll say is this, that now that I've gone through 2 of my own campaigns that really kind of built upon one another, and I had such close understanding of every aspect of that. In addition to all of our clients, we've had almost 250 campaigns at this point that we've run. I noticed something is that when you really, really need to pre-market, it's obvious that you need rather to pre-market. You don't have an audience at all. You're like, I know now, and whenever anything becomes common knowledge, you are it's almost like a mistake to blindly follow this knowledge. I remember back, if you remember, you'll make more money if you have miniatures in your game. Just make more money if you have miniatures in your game. And when common everyday gamers are telling crowdfunding creators should have more miniatures, they'll make more money. The creators, just by listening to that advice, it's like old dated advice that's not current.
Yep.
And so when something becomes like common knowledge, you have to be careful about just assuming this is true, because you're missing a whole lot of pieces to the puzzle. And so pre-launch marketing, I believe, is much more common knowledge that you should do pre-launch. And there are companies that are now kind of pushing back against this. I see established companies are kind of pushing back against the pre-launch phase, whereas established companies will say, okay, we've got like 3 weeks. We have clients that will regularly tell us, all right, we're launching this in 2 weeks or whatever. And a lot of those companies will rely on their current fan base just coming back and telling other people, and more of like the organic. They've worked really hard to build their core audience, their pre-launch audience, and they've earned that, right? So they're gonna have success when they launch. And whereas the brand new creator that doesn't have an audience knows, I need to invest the majority of my money into pre-launch marketing, because if I fund and I don't get funded within the first 48 hours, my campaign is dead. In the games category, we just did a book that funded on like week 2, which was a fun one, but the Green Ember series. But so it's different in other categories, but I find that common knowledge is that new creators must earn the right to fund and build an audience, and established creators kind of see there's some pushback there where they're like, oh, I don't need to. And the problem is, so it's a lot easier if you don't have any audience at all, nobody's ever heard of your game, it's a lot easier to kind of find the low hanging fruit. And with ads, with whatever, people have been hunting for games like this, and for all their life, they just wish the game like this existed. There are a certain number of people that are like that. Now, after this group of people has been picked, after this low hanging fruit has been picked, it gets harder. Rather, you're going to get less people. It's going to cost you more money to get another subscriber. But to kind of illustrate an example, my first deliverance campaign, we were earning emails for like 90 cents to $1. My next deliverance campaign, it cost me $3.50 to earn a subscriber. Those people, those subscribers that I earned for $3.50, spent an average of $148 on my campaign, and they had and
pretty good.
I'm sorry, the conversion
Yeah.
the conversion rate of those people is about 20%. So it was absurdly good. Like the deal was absurdly good. So like a 10% conversion rate, it cost me like $35 per purchase to make $148 purchase. So yeah, it was very, very solid. And it's like, man, if I just knew that, I would have paid more. So, but I did a whole lot of extra research into figuring that out. So I guess the way I'm kind of coming around to answering your question, I hope, is pre-launch marketing is so valuable for every campaign, because you will still find new people that never heard of you, and it really adds fuel to an already burning fire. So I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but hopefully it shows the need for that pre-launch. But man, when you have the opportunity to press the gas, you've got to, like for me, like right now, my post campaign, like I'm in this phase where I'm looking to get people on my pledge manager and whatever, and wrap up so that I can manufacture. Well, I want to make more money during my pledge manager, and I made $500,000 in the days of my campaign on Kickstarter, and since then I've made about 180,000 more. And that's with a lot of effort and whatnot. The conversion rate is not the same. It's just not the same. So like when you have this moment of time that you can really press the gas, if you get cold feet, you you're really you need to prepare yourself. So I call it sunk cost. Like you need to have a certain amount of money you're planning on spending, and your goal is to spend it in the wisest manner possible. And then if it's working, you can maybe, put the rest on the credit card, because 2 weeks after the campaign's over, you get a big fat bank deposit that you can pay the card off from, your Kickstarter campaign being successful. Yeah, it's a really sort of a tough situation, but I try to take a step back and think, if my campaign, if I just rely on those people that know who I am and rely on the organic push, I'm going to logically, if I just send ads to new people, more people will discover me than normal. The temptation is to think that all of my organic fans will reach everyone that I would have reached with ads. So I don't want to cannibalize, I don't want to spend $350 on a lead that I could have had for free. Right. And so my contention is that spending on ads, you're going to reach different people. And even if they do hear about you from someone, the ad might be the thing that catches them, right? That you've got the driver and the catcher. Your community is the driver. You still need to pay money for catchers. The ad campaign that they're like, oh yeah, my buddy told me about that last week, I'm going to click right now. They backed during your Kickstarter campaign, not because they were told about, but because they were told about it and you sent them an ad. So anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully
one thing I'll add is that I think from running so many different campaigns in terms of that funding curve, is that it really differs from campaign to campaign.
Yes,
I think it's because
that's what I'm saying.
There's just so many different variables that go into what makes a campaign. So sometimes you see a huge spike in the beginning and then it just flatlines, and then you see another spike at the end. Other times you see a huge spike in the beginning, it just keeps on going up, and there is no kind of variation other than that. And I think it's just because there's so many variables, and I think the danger for people to do is to look at something in the past and then assume it's going to happen for them in the future. It's really the problem of induction. And there's limitations to sort of analysis. So you can look at, okay, well, what's the averages for these things? And am I doing it? I think all you can do is your best. So I think what you have to look at everything holistically. And is my title optimized? Is my image optimized? Is the game good?
Yep.
Do I have this kind of pre-launch community? And all those things work together to create a result. So I think when you're live, it's maybe not be helpful in thinking of terms, where do I sit on the kind of, the industry standard? I think it's what can I do to make everything better, just generally, and then not really worry about the kind of bell curve and really just focus on trying to do your best with what you have, because it does look so different from campaign to campaign. And I think it's because there's just so many variables at play that you can't really kind of bring it down to a single factor.
Yep.
One other thing to consider is the data in the very beginning and at the very end. You've got this like sort of an N shape, if you will, to the typical campaign. If you were to take off the first day, to just remove the first and the second day, and look at the data that you've earned every other day aside from those first two, and you cut the last 2 days off, the final 48 hours would be like the last 3 days off. That is when you can then see the meaningful increase. So like, for example, I had an email blast go out that I paid for, that I wanted to work. I that had a huge jump. I mean, it caused like a $20,000 jump over a few days. I had weirdly enough a YouTube video, like kind of some random guy made a controversial YouTube video that ended up getting a lot of like 100,000 views or something, and that was like a huge spike on that day. But it all pales in comparison to me raising $180,000 or $170,000 on day one. Raising $20,000, whereas normally my daily is like $8,000. Doesn't look like a lot when you're looking at that graph.
When it's just boom, boom, and then boom again. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's really important, I think, especially during the mid-campaign, to look at each thing you're doing. Like, what day did you put an update out? I'll say, like, I'm a big believer in not putting updates out on Tuesday because, a bunch of new campaigns launch. Yeah. Those, and so just don't, you'll see when you put an update out, if you made money or if it flatlined or if it went down or whatever, like the value of your update is what you can kind of say, like, how much do people value my update? If more people jumped in, then you're doing a good job. And so anyway, hopefully that is helpful.
I mean, for sure. To all of that end, the way that I like to think about it is like, make sure that you understand every single lever that you can hit in your campaign. Like, you have all of these levers. They're actions that you can take that can demonstrably impact your campaign. So I literally have a wall in my office. I've had it for like 10 years now that I intentionally leave blank. I really don't like having a blank wall, but it's so useful because it's where all my Post-it notes go. I'm moving right now, so there's no Post-it notes on it. Otherwise, I'd show you. But what I do is I have an impact versus effort graph always. And most of the time, it's my day-to-day priorities. And it's impact, the impact that the action has, and the effort that the action takes, right? And then I have all of my levers and I write them down. It's a newsletter. It's a sponsored opportunity. It's an advertisement. It's some sort of new thing that I can do. It's an update. I write them all down and then I chart them. How much impact do I think this will have? And what is the effort to make it happen? And then everything that is low impact, low effort, I know or high impact, low effort, I know for sure that I'm going to do. It's just a matter of when I'm going to do it. But now I can think eyes wide open, like, okay, do I really want to do this high impact or high effort, medium impact thing? Is that worth my time? And I can have a really pragmatic conversation with myself about, like, I really should probably focus my efforts elsewhere. But knowing what all of those things are in terms of levers to pull during your campaign, like Alchemy, we worked with a lot of partners. And so had a lot of friends that were like, yeah, I'll be happy to promote you. We would hit a slump and it'd be like, okay, let's look at all of our levers. Which one will move the needle most effectively for us today? that's the lever that we're going to pull. And so I think understanding what all of those different things are for you so that you can strategize on a day-to-day basis about like, how most can I make an impact today is super valuable and speaks to everything that you guys were talking about. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, I have one more question. We've
Yeah.
been at this a long time. I really appreciate your time. It's awesome.
Of course.
The last question that I have for you is something that you wrote on that Stonemaier Games article. Really was very interesting. You said this. You said creators should be gradually guiding backers to higher pledge tiers rather than forcing them to make huge leaps from a dollar perspective. And the context was that we were talking about pledge levels.
Yeah.
And if you have a pledge level that's $10, your next one's $100, your next one's $1,000, it tends to be a huge leap. And I really hadn't thought. So my logic is that each pledge level has to have a purpose. So for me, the common one is the base game pledge. Then you've got all gameplay content, and then you've got like all cosmetic upgrades and all gameplay content. And those are like my base three, like regular, deluxe, all in kind of pledge levels. But the logic you used was really interesting. I'd love to learn a little bit about maybe, if you wouldn't mind expanding on that. And then in addition, hidden pledges are now this little X factor, aren't they? So if you wouldn't mind getting into that.
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, it really is fairly simple. And I want to make sure that I'm being abundantly clear. I'm not advocating for tricking anybody, but instead being very clear about what your value proposition is at each tier, right? So, just from a dollars and cents perspective, if you're running a kind of bulkier board game or tabletop role playing game, right? Our average pledge value for campaigns that end up north of $500,000 is roughly, it kind of starts at around $88 and it makes its way up sometimes very well beyond that, right? Like I think Restoration Games, just their campaign, they were at like $280 was their average pledge value. So I think when I look at tiers, I want to make sure that the value proposition is very, very clear at every single tier. So, like having a base game, of course, like the economic, I want this game, I want to support you. Roughly 50% of your backers are going to back at that level because that is all that they want. But then you have to understand the environment that you're selling this in. It's Kickstarter. It's people really excited to support projects, right? Like this is early adopters. They're stoked about you. They want you to give them an opportunity to support you at a higher level. And so there's like, I call it like a Goldilocks tier. So we're sort of like, okay, I really love this project. Let's see what we've got. I've got like $40, $50, $60 base game tier. Okay, cool. That's great. But like, what's the next one down? I see that I can scroll a little bit farther here. Okay, like base game and like a piece of accoutrement that is cool or useful or like my name in the box. Be careful about that, by the way. Inside Up Games did that with one of their first games, and it did so well that they had to actually manufacture like a fold out from the box to fit all the names in it. So be careful. So there's like this little extra thing that's like, okay, that's kind of cool, but like, what else is there? And then there should be a point where they're just like deluxe edition, with this extra thing that you have already planned on doing, et cetera, et cetera. And there's all this value that exists in this one tier that has healthy margins, high value for your customer, and a pledge value that reflects where you would like to see your average pledge value be. Right. So like for some games, that's going to be $150. For some games, that's going to be $90. Like it really just depends. But people are excited to support creators that are doing stuff that resonates with them. So if you have the bandwidth and opportunity to create a really high value tier, I would say look at it. So like when we look at like base game to deluxe, sometimes those are perfectly spaced apart so that it's not a huge jump. Sometimes when we look at Artistry was a campaign by this really cool company, Duck Sominum Games. It's like a husband and wife. They just want to make really cool games and they do an amazing job with it. They have a tier of their game that is a literal jewelry box. It's so cool. It's like a padded, felted jewelry box with all of the components inside it. It's $300. Or $200 on the campaign, which I think is a screaming deal, but because it's like, I've seen it. It's amazing, whatever. Anyway, they have a tier that's sort of in between that has some of those components, some of that the parts of that hyper deluxe edition that give value to people who maybe it's not economically feasible to back at $200, but they still want to support more than just the base game. And so creating an opportunity for those people to find this sort of Goldilocks position is really, really useful. And so that's really what I'm trying to drive at there is like, just be intentional with the tiers that you choose. You know, you can have more than 2, you can have more than 3. I wouldn't go, conventional wisdom. I don't have a ton of data. This is all anecdotal, but conventional wisdom would say no more than 7, right? Even I think that's maybe a little too many. I would prefer somewhere around 5 just as a consumer. But having that sort of kitchen sink, I call it the kitchen sink tier. It's just like, here's everything that we're doing and everything that we've ever done. Buy it for the amount of money that it's worth. But then there's also this other tier that's like, hey, support us more than just the base game, but in a way that is meaningful and valuable for you. Does that make sense? Am I answering that question well enough?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. I appreciate that insight. Sean, you have a question? I had one more I wanted to squeeze in.
Yeah, in terms of the secret pledges, if someone was to back via the secret pledge, does that update in the public kind of display of the total, backers and total funding?
Very pointed question. I really like the question. It's also a hard question to answer for us right now. So we released secret rewards, and today it does not. It does not update, and we are understanding how people are using it. So one of the really cool things about that is that that was a request from a technology creator, and we made that product. We made that secret reward for them as like this sort of low hanging fruit. Like, okay, we can do this. It's a very simple feature. And now we're seeing a ton of people use it in a bunch of different ways. I know a creator that just used it as their retail tier as secret rewards, so they weren't muddying their page up with a retail tier. I've seen people use it to celebrate a loyal community that already exists, a newsletter, a Discord community, whatever. I've also seen people really effectively use it as a funnel towards a marketing channel that converts well, right? So say you have 2,000 people in your Discord, but there's not a high similarity rate with the newsletter, and the newsletter converts at a better rate. Post in the Discord, hey, join the newsletter, get a secret reward tier for this thing that we're doing. And that's a great way to increase your highly convertible funnel. So it's been really cool to see how people use it. Some people use it as a discount. Some people add an extra thing to the tier. But we're really excited to sort of continue to grow that. But right now, because so many people are using it in so many divergent ways, we're trying to understand what the best way is that we can provide maximum transparency to everybody, but also keep the secret reward a secret reward for the people that want that.
I mean, just in the last few months, you guys have put out so many new pieces to the Kickstarter puzzle. I mean, you guys just released your pledge manager. You've got advanced analytics. By the way, I'm curious, is advanced analytics going? It looks like a third-party company that specializes in this. Is the reason that it's only available while the campaign is live? Is that because it costs, in essence, costs money to have it?
Expensive. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At scale, it's expensive. If you need access to that report, let us know. Games at Kickstarter.com. If you need that after the fact, we can pull it for you. But yeah, it is just a financial thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like that as well, and I'm so glad we can actually get that for clients. But you guys have now featured rewards, which is really cool. You enabled your pledge over time feature. You've got like the late pledge system, which is press this button, make $20,000. And your hidden pledges. Is there anything new that you're working on? What is the kind of the mentality of Kickstarter right now after releasing all these features? And when can we expect updates or what's the plan?
Yeah. I mean, I think no crowdfunding nerds exclusive that I can drop this time around. Maybe next time. But what I will say is that I think a big context shift in the past couple of years at Kickstarter, we are very, very actively listening. And so we've done a lot of work, and now we have a bunch of ideas and we're really excited to do them. But what we're not going to do is become a feature factory, wherein every time you come to the platform, there's a new feature, but you're not really sure why the new feature exists or what value it has. Like, we're trying to be very pointed with what we produce so that we are most effectively of service to creators. So we just released Pledge Manager and Pledge Over Time. Both this month are generally available to everybody. We are on a listening tour. How are you using it? What is your feedback? Is there something that is missing? Is there something that works really well? What can we do to serve you best? So, we understand to be true that we want to get really, really good or improve like our pre-launch experience. We understand that we want to do more with our pledge manager. And we also understand that we want to go in directions that are new, novel, and highly supportive of people that run crowdfunding campaigns, just in general. And we have lots of really cool ideas in that space. But we are building a platform for a very, very important group of people in society today. And I think the second that we lose sight of that, we've sort of lost the plot, right? Like, creativity and innovation and novelty is so deeply human. It's like a part of the human experience. And that's what's so amazing about Kickstarter as a platform, is that it enables so many people to do that, right? There's like a little grandmother in Mexico City that runs a Kickstarter every year. She makes like a couple $100. She makes a cookbook, and those, dozen people or whatever get to experience that cookbook every single year. And it's really amazing. And then also campaigns like, Alien Evolved Edition get to come to the platform. And so those two things feel so dissimilar, but it is just creative people sharing in the art that they make. And we as a company, like, are so excited to be able to serve all of those people. But we're not just going to throw a bunch of features at the wall and see what sticks. We're going to build in service of those people. So perhaps a disappointing answer, but maybe my philosophical waxing.
Honestly, the fact that you said that Kickstarter's listening is a 180 from just, just as a creator, the way maybe I'm salty or something like that, but the way that I felt Kickstarter used to be before Everett Taylor took over, was that they weren't listening. And now it feels like they are, which is a marked improvement, huge improvement. So I love that Kickstarter's listening.
So Asher, thank you so much for your time. It's really been a pleasure. I'm sure there's a lot more questions the listeners have for you. Yeah. Could you present two things? What's the best way for people to connect with you? And then secondly, would you mind doing an Ask Me Anything in our Crowdfunding Nerds community? Because I'm sure people will just be able to throw their questions up, and then that way you can answer, and then everyone gets the answer. So yeah, what's the best way to connect with you? And would you mind doing an Ask Me Anything in our Crowdfunding Nerds Facebook community?
Yeah, for sure. So it's very important to me that my team is a highly accessible one. So you can email games@kickstarter.com, GAMES@kickstarter.com, to get in touch with us. I get every one of those emails, and so do the other people on my team. So we look at that inbox every single day. I really want to make sure that everybody who wants that email address has it. Be liberal with it. Please get in touch. Kickstarter can't exist unless it is serving creators. So if we can help, let us know. So there's that. Second of all, yeah, totally. I would love to answer questions. Again, it is very important to me that I am of service of this community of people. I think creatives in general make the world go round. I think that they are so deeply part of the human experience that if people like me, who really love spreadsheets and Ahrefs.com and other nerdy stuff like that, like if I'm not using my creativity to uplift those people, then I feel like I myself, just as a human being in the world, have sort of lost the plot. So yeah, I would love to do that.
Cool.
Great.
That's fantastic. Well, Asher, thank you so much for all of the time that you spent with us. It's been almost 90 minutes and it's just been a real pleasure. So hopefully you would love to join us again when you have super secret features and want to give Crowdfunding Nerds exclusive. But you're welcome back on our podcast Anytime. So
Yeah.
for now, man. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. You guys are amazing, and to even have the opportunity to speak to you and to your listeners is something that means a lot to me. So I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Well, all right. We're gonna have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.